Police officer arrests black woman for alleged theft on a plane, but what she reveals next leaves him speechless. In this riveting video, we explore a startling incident that unfolded on a busy flight. A police officer was summoned to arrest a black woman suspected of stealing. As tensions soared, the situation took an unexpected turn, leaving everyone on board, including the officer, completely stunned. This is more than a story about one woman on a flight. It's about courage, leadership, and a commitment to change. Stay tuned to discover how she's calm defiance exposed systemic issues and inspired an entire organization to take action. Tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and share the story with many people. Dive into this gripping narrative and see how she's resilience became a beacon for fairness and integrity, both in the air and on the ground. Heavy things radiated off the truly executed craftsmanship belonging to the city. The hum of jet engines filled the luxurious first-class cabin, blending with the soft clink of glasses and the rustle of newspapers. Passengers settled into their wide, leather-upholstered seats, the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air. The cabin was a haven of comfort, its warm lighting and polished finishes offering a sense of exclusivity. Among the travelers was Sarah Bennett, a poised woman in her late 30s, dressed in a tailored navy suit that exuded professionalism. A simple gold bracelet glinted on her wrist as she flipped through a well-worn book, a faint smile on her lips. She had the air of someone accustomed to such surroundings, her quiet demeanor blending effortlessly into the environment. But Sarah wasn't just another first-class passenger. Unknown to everyone else, she was the public relations director for the airline, traveling incognito to assess customer service. It was part of her job to observe interactions, spot areas for improvement, and ensure the airline lived up to its promises. On this flight, Sarah had chosen to remain an unnoticed observer. At least, that was the plan. The cabin was a mix of personalities. Across the aisle sat a burly businessman, his tailored suit a little too snug and his expression one of constant irritation. He grumbled under his breath about the flight delay, swatting away a flight attendant's offer of a warm towel. Farther back, a young couple whispered excitedly about their destination. Their hands intertwined as they glanced out the window. A few others were engrossed in their own worlds, absorbed in screens or magazines. Then there was Captain Henry Lawson. He strode into the cabin with a commanding presence, his tall frame and sharp uniform demanding attention. His smile was as polished as his aviator sunglasses, but his demeanor carried an air of arrogance that seemed to weigh down the room. His gaze swept over the cabin, briefly pausing on Sarah before moving on, his expression unreadable but laced with faint disdain. "Good afternoon, folks," he announced, his voice smooth but insincere. "We'll be departing shortly. Thank you for flying with us." Sarah's eyes flicked up from her book, her instincts pricking at something unspoken in his tone. As a seasoned professional, she had encountered all types of personalities in her career, but something about Lawson's presence made her uneasy. The flight took off smoothly, and Sarah let herself relax into her seat, her focus shifting back to her book. Her task was simple: to observe and make mental notes. Complaints about this particular crew had reached her desk, and she wanted to see firsthand whether they held merit. For the first hour, everything seemed routine. The attendants moved efficiently, offering drinks and attending to passengers' needs. Sarah noted their professionalism, but also observed subtle tensions, hesitant smiles, nervous glances exchanged among the crew. She suspected they weren't at ease, but the reason remained unclear. As Sarah turned a page in her book, her thoughts drifted to the reports she had read. Her role wasn't just about ensuring customer satisfaction. It was about fostering a culture of respect and inclusion. Today's flight was supposed to be just another day of quiet evaluation. But when the president was with the passengers, Sarah's instincts told her otherwise. Something about this flight, and particularly Captain Lawson's presence, felt off. She couldn't yet pinpoint why, but her years of experience taught her to trust that feeling. Little did she know, the routine journey she had planned would soon unravel, thrusting her into a confrontation that would test not only her composure, but also the very principles she stood for. The serene atmosphere of the first-class cabin shattered when a panicked voice cut through the hum of the engines. "My wallet, it's gone!" the burly businessman exclaimed, his voice loud enough to make heads turn. His face was flushed, his expression a mix of anger and frustration, as he stood abruptly, gesturing wildly. Sarah Bennett looked up from her book, her instincts immediately on high alert. Across the aisle, the businessman's agitated movements had drawn the attention of passengers and crew alike. A flight attendant hurried over, her professional demeanor masking visible unease. "Sarah, please remain calm," the attendant said softly. "Could you check your belongings again? Perhaps it slipped under your seat." "I already looked," he barked, his voice rising further. "Someone must have taken it." His accusatory gaze swept the cabin, pausing momentarily on each passenger before landing squarely on Sarah. Sarah met his stare with a calm, steady gaze, her hands still resting on her book. She could feel the weight of the passengers' eyes shifting toward her, their curiosity mingled with unease. "Mr. Martin." The tension escalated further when Captain Henry Lawson appeared in the aisle, his commanding presence adding to the already charged atmosphere. His usual polished smile was gone, replaced by a hardened expression. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked, though his tone carried more authority than concern. "This woman," the businessman said, pointing at Sarah. "She must have taken it. She's been sitting right there, pretending to read. It's too convenient." Captain Lawson's gaze settled on Sarah, a flicker of disdain crossing his face. "Ma'am," he said, his tone clipped, "I'm going to need you to step aside so we can check your belongings." Sarah raised an eyebrow, her calm demeanor unbroken. "Excuse me, Captain, but are you accusing me of theft?" "I didn't say that," Lawson replied, though his sharp tone betrayed his intentions. "But we need to rule everyone out. Cooperation would be appreciated." Sarah's years of experience navigating tense corporate environments had taught her the value of measured responses. Slowly, she closed her book and placed it on her tray table. "You're welcome to search my bag," she said evenly, "but I suggest you tread carefully. There are protocols for handling situations like this. Are you certain you're following them?" Her words were a quiet warning, but Lawson chose to ignore it. He signaled for the flight attendant to proceed. Passengers murmured among themselves, their whispers filled with both curiosity and unease. The businessman smirked, seemingly satisfied as the attendant hesitantly opened Sarah's neatly organized bag. "Take it and yermian," he announced. Inside, the attendant found nothing unusual, only a tablet, a small notebook, and a folded scarf. Her hands trembled slightly as she whispered, "Nothing here, Captain." "Check again," Lawson snapped, his frustration growing. "That won't be necessary," Sarah interjected, her voice cutting through the tension. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out an ID card, holding it up for everyone to see. The murmurs among the passengers grew louder, and the flight attendants exchanged uneasy glances. At that moment, the flight attendant knelt near the businessman's seat and retrieved something from underneath. Rising slowly, she held out a wallet. "Sir," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "is this what you're looking for?" The businessman turned crimson, his bravado melting into embarrassment. He snatched the wallet from her hand, muttering an incoherent apology. Sarah remained seated, her calm composure unwavering as the flight attendant stepped back. Captain Lawson, however, was less willing to let go. His jaw tightened, his pride clearly bruised, but he said nothing further. The incident had revealed much more than a misplaced wallet. It had exposed biases, assumptions, and a troubling misuse of authority. For Sarah, the moment was more than a personal affront. It was a call to action. She quietly made a mental note. The turbulence on this flight wasn't just in the air. It was rooted in the culture she had come to evaluate. The tension in the cabin lingered like a storm cloud, even after the businessman's wallet had been found. Sarah Bennett sat quietly, her calm demeanor masking the thoughts racing through her mind. Captain Henry Lawson's gaze, sharp and resentful, briefly landed on her before he disappeared into the cockpit. Minutes later, a flight attendant, Mia, approached Sarah's seat with a hesitant expression. Leaning in, she whispered, Mr. Bennett, I'm so sorry for the inconvenience, but Captain Lawson has decided to make an unscheduled landing. He's claiming a security breach." Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly, her composure intact, but her mind immediately assessing the implications. "A security breach," she repeated, her voice low but firm. "What grounds does he have for such a claim?" Nia hesitated, glancing nervously toward the cockpit. "He didn't specify, ma'am. He just insisted airport security meet the plane on the ground." As the plane descended toward a regional airport, passengers murmured anxiously. Confusion replaced their earlier curiosity, and the once calm atmosphere of the cabin grew tense. Sarah remained seated, her hands folded in her lap, a picture of quiet resolve. She knew this wasn't about security. This was about Captain Lawson's pride and his refusal to admit he had been wrong. When the plane landed and came to a stop, Captain Lawson emerged from the cockpit, his steps brisk and his expression smug. He strode directly to Sarah's seat, towering over her as he said with mock politeness, "Ms. Bennett, I'm afraid I must insist that you disembark first. Security will need to speak with you." Sarah met his gaze unflinchingly, her voice steady as she replied, "On what grounds, Captain?" "It's standard procedure for someone under suspicion," Lawson said with a smirk. Without a word, Sarah rose gracefully, gathered her belongings, and walked to the exit. As she descended the steps onto the tarmac, she was greeted by a team of airport security officers. Their confident postures faltered when Sarah calmly produced her airline ID. "Mrs. Bennett," one officer stammered, his face paling. "We didn't realize—" "Save it," Sarah said coolly, cutting him off. "I'll be speaking with your supervisor shortly." Behind her, passengers and crew began disembarking. The businessman who had caused the uproar avoided her gaze, his embarrassment clear. Captain Lawson, however, lingered at the top of the stairs, his arrogance intact, but his confidence starting to waver. The confrontation reached its peak when Sarah, now joined by airline executives who had been alerted to the situation, stepped into a private conference room at the airport. Among those present was James Delacroix, the airline's CEO. His sharp suit and piercing gaze commanded instant respect as he addressed Sarah directly. "Mrs. Bennett," he began, his tone respectful, "I've been briefed on the situation. I'd like to hear your account." Sarah recounted the events calmly, detailing not just the false accusation, but also the captain's violations of protocol, discriminatory behavior, and misuse of authority. She emphasized the importance of addressing these issues not just for her, but for the passengers and crew who had witnessed them. When she finished, Delacroix turned his attention to Lawson, who was visibly uncomfortable. "Captain Lawson," he said firmly, "do you have anything to add?" Lawson attempted to justify his actions, claiming he had acted in the interests of safety, but Delacroix raised a hand, silencing him. "Safety does not include fabricating breaches or singling out passengers based on personal biases," Delacroix said sharply. "Your actions jeopardize the trust of everyone on board and put the reputation of this airline at risk." With that, Delacroix turned back to Sarah. "Miss Bennett, I want to personally apologize for what you've endured today. Rest assured this will be handled appropriately." As Captain Lawson was escorted out, his arrogance crumbled. For the first time, the full weight of his actions seemed to settle on him. Sarah, however, remained poised, her resolve stronger than ever. The pivotal moments of that day weren't just about holding one man accountable. They marked the beginning of a broader effort to address systemic issues within the airline. For Sarah, the turbulence she had endured on this flight was just the start of a journey toward meaningful change. The aftermath of the incident was anything but quiet. For Sarah Bennett, however, it was an opportunity, a chance to turn a deeply uncomfortable experience into meaningful action. Sitting across from the airline's senior leadership team in the brightly lit boardroom, Sarah exuded the same calm determination that had carried her through the ordeal on the flight. "This isn't just about one incident," she began, her voice steady and clear. "What happened was a symptom of deeper issues. A culture that allows bias to go unchecked and protocols to be misused. If we want to prevent this from happening again, we need more than apologies. We need action." Seated at the head of the table, James Delacroix, the CEO, nodded gravely. You have my full support, Sarah. What do you propose? Sarah leaned forward, her gaze sweeping across the table. First, we need a comprehensive internal investigation. I've already compiled a list of key areas to review, starting with Captain Lawson's behavior and extending to the broader workplace culture. We also need to involve HR to determine whether similar complaints were ignored in the past. Delacroix scribbled notes, then gestured for her to continue. Second, Sarah said, mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all employees, from entry-level staff to senior leadership. This isn't just about checking boxes. It's about creating a workplace where respect and fairness are foundational values. The leadership team murmured their agreement, and Delacroix raised a hand to quiet the room. And how do we ensure this doesn't come off as a PR move? He asked. Sarah's expression was firm. Transparency. We need to acknowledge what happened and commit to doing better. That means sharing our plan publicly, owning our shortcomings, and showing tangible progress. This isn't about protecting our image. It's about earning the trust of our employees and passengers. The room fell silent as Sarah's words sank in. Eleanor Reeves, the airline's head of operations, spoke up. What about reporting systems? Do we have a way for employees to safely raise concerns? Sarah nodded. We'll implement a revamped reporting system that ensures complaints are taken seriously and addressed promptly. It must be accessible, confidential, and effective. We can't just rely on people hoping someone like me happens to be on their flight. The discussion continued for nearly an hour, with Sarah addressing questions and refining her proposals. By the end of the meeting, the leadership team was unanimous in their support. Delacroix leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on Sarah. You've given us a clear path forward. I want you to lead this initiative, Sarah, not just as a response to this incident, but as a long-term commitment to making this airline a leader in inclusivity and respect. The weight of the responsibility wasn't lost on her, but Sarah didn't hesitate. I'll make it happen, she said confidently. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah and her team worked tirelessly to implement the reforms. The first step was launching the internal investigation, which unearthed troubling patterns of behavior. Complaints against Captain Lawson had been filed before, but had gone unaddressed. These findings underscored the urgent need for systemic change. Sarah personally oversaw the rollout of the mandatory diversity and inclusion training. The program was designed to be immersive and impactful, focusing on real-world scenarios and fostering empathy. It wasn't just about understanding workplace policies, it was about recognizing and dismantling unconscious biases. Flight attendants, ground staff, and even senior executives attended the sessions, which were facilitated by experienced trainers. At first, there was resistance, particularly from some senior employees who saw it as unnecessary. But as the sessions progressed, stories emerged. Stories of microaggressions, overlooked promotions, and silent struggles. The training became a space for reflection and growth, sparking conversations that had long been overdue. Meanwhile, Sarah spearheaded the redesign of the airline's reporting system. The new platform allowed employees to submit complaints anonymously, with a dedicated team assigned to investigate and resolve them. To ensure accountability, regular updates on the number and nature of complaints were shared with the leadership team. Sarah's reforms extended beyond internal processes. She proposed the creation of a diversity task force, composed of employees from various roles and backgrounds. This task force would act as a bridge between frontline staff and executives, ensuring that all voices were heard and considered in decision-making. One of the first to join the task force was Mia, the flight attendant who had bravely stepped forward during the wallet incident. "You've shown us that it's possible to speak up," Mia told Sarah during their first meeting. "I want to help make this airline a place where everyone feels safe and valued." As the reforms began to take effect, the airline saw tangible results. Employee satisfaction surveys showed marked improvements, and passengers noticed the difference too. The airline's transparency and commitment to change were praised by the media, positioning it as a leader in fostering an inclusive culture. For Sarah, the journey wasn't just about fixing a broken system. It was about setting a new standard for the industry. Standing in her office months later, she looked out at the planes taxiing on the runway, a sense of quiet satisfaction washing over her. This was only the beginning. The turbulence she had endured on that flight had set the stage for lasting change, and Sarah was determined to see it through. With the full support of the CEO and her team, she had turned a moment of injustice into a movement for progress, proving that leadership isn't just about authority, it's about action and accountability. After the incident, Sarah Bennett's resolve became the driving force behind transformative changes within the airline. As the public relations director, she wasn't just focused on damage control. She aimed to rebuild trust, improve company culture, and ensure such incidents would never happen again. In a private meeting with the airline's leadership, including CEO James Delacroix, Sarah outlined her vision for reform. She began with a detailed account of the systemic issues the flight had highlighted, from Captain Lawson's discriminatory behavior to the lack of clear protocols for handling such accusations. "This isn't just about one person," Sarah said, her voice steady but firm. "It's about the environment that allowed this behavior to thrive. If we want to regain the trust of our passengers and employees, we need to take bold, immediate action." Her plan was comprehensive. It included 1. Mandatory diversity and inclusion training, a company-wide initiative to educate staff about unconscious biases, equitable treatment, and conflict resolution. 2. Revamped reporting systems, a more transparent and accessible system for employees and passengers to report incidents without fear of retaliation. 3. Leadership accountability, a commitment from the airline's leadership to lead by example with clear consequences for those who fail to uphold company values. 4. Frontline Employee Task Force, a group of flight attendants, ground crew, and other staff, including Mia, the courageous flight attendant from Sarah's flight, tasked with providing ongoing feedback on the airline's policies and culture. The CEO, visibly impressed by Sarah's poise and thoroughness, spoke up. "This is the kind of leadership we need," Delacroix said. "Not just to address this incident, but to set a precedent for the future. You have my full support, Sarah. Let's make this happen." Under Sarah's guidance, the reforms began immediately. She worked closely with the human resources team and external consultants to develop impactful training programs. The first sessions, held with airline executives, set the tone. From there, the training expanded to include pilots, flight attendants, and ground crew. The revamped reporting system was another game changer. Sarah ensured that every employee, regardless of their position, had a safe and anonymous way to voice concerns. Complaints would now be reviewed by an independent committee, and swift action would be taken when necessary. But for Sarah, these initiatives weren't just about preventing future incidents. They were about creating an airline culture rooted in dignity, respect, and accountability. Her leadership style, marked by empathy and determination, inspired others to take part in the transformation. Months later, the changes Sarah championed were beginning to take root. The airline's culture, once plagued by subtle biases and unspoken hierarchies, had started to shift. Employees across the company reported a newfound sense of inclusivity and respect, and it was evident in the way they interacted with one another and with passengers. Mia, the flight attendant who had bravely stepped forward during the incident, became a symbol of the change. Her role on the task force allowed her to voice the concerns of frontline employees, and she quickly emerged as a leader in her own right. "Mia's input has been invaluable," Sarah said during a company town hall. "She represents the heart of our airline, the people who ensure every passenger's journey is safe and comfortable. We're listening now, and will continue to listen." The once tense relationships between crew members began to thaw. In training sessions, employees shared their experiences openly, often for the first time. Pilots and flight attendants who had rarely interacted before found common ground in the shared goal of improving the airline's reputation and culture. Passengers, too, noticed the difference. The warmth and professionalism of the crew felt genuine, a stark contrast to the indifference or tension they might have experienced in the past. Feedback surveys highlighted the shift, with many noting how valued they felt, regardless of their background or class of travel. The airline's leadership also stepped up. CEO James Delacroix made regular appearances at training sessions, emphasizing the importance of accountability from the top down. His visible commitment sent a clear message. The airline was serious about change. One of the most significant shifts was the role of the task force. Employees like Mia, who once felt powerless to address systemic issues, now had a direct line to the executive team. Their recommendations led to tangible improvements, from updated onboarding processes to clearer policies on handling conflicts. Reflecting on the transformation, Sarah acknowledged there was still work to be done. "Culture doesn't change overnight," she said during a press conference. "But we're committed to the journey. This isn't just about fixing what went wrong. It's about building something better for everyone." On a recent flight, Sarah had a moment to reflect. As she boarded as a passenger, she was greeted by a flight attendant with a warm smile. The cabin was filled with a sense of ease and professionalism, a stark contrast to the chaos of that fateful day. As the plane lifted off, Sarah gazed out the window, a quiet satisfaction washing over her. The journey toward lasting change was far from over, but the turbulence of the past had given way to clearer skies, and for Sarah, that was a victory worth celebrating. Sarah Bennett's journey on that flight was far more than an isolated incident. It was a defining moment that showcased the power of resilience, leadership, and a steadfast commitment to justice. What began as an act of discrimination turned into an opportunity for profound change, thanks to her unwavering composure and determination to address deeper systemic issues. Sarah's ability to navigate the situation with grace and authority not only held individuals accountable, but also laid the groundwork for a cultural transformation within the airline. Her refusal to back down in the face of bias served as a reminder that courage and integrity can dismantle even the most entrenched injustices. Through her actions, Sarah inspired others to find their voices. Employees like Mia, who once felt powerless, now had a platform to influence change. The airline's passengers, staff, and leadership all became part of a broader movement toward accountability and inclusivity. The reforms Sarah championed sent a powerful message. Respect, fairness, and equity are non-negotiable, regardless of rank, title, or background. As we reflect on Sarah's story, it's a testament to how one person's stand can ignite a ripple effect of transformation. Her resilience reminds us that even in the face of adversity, meaningful progress is possible when we choose to act with integrity and purpose. The journey toward lasting change is never easy, and it's rarely quick. But Sarah's story leaves us with a hopeful lesson. Turbulence, whether in the air or in life, can lead to clearer skies if we approach it with determination and vision. Today, Sarah's work continues to shape the airline's culture, ensuring that dignity and respect are at the forefront of every decision. Her leadership has set a precedent not just for the company, but for all of us to strive for fairness and inclusion in our own spheres. As the plane ascends into the clouds, leaving the runway behind, we're reminded that progress is a journey. And thanks to leaders like Sarah Bennett, the path forward is one paved with hope, resilience, and the belief that change is always worth fighting for.